Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelika, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's Media Development Manager. For this very special episode, we are speaking with Brenda Schertz, the Senior Lecturer in American Sign Language and Coordinator of the ASL Program here at Cornell.
Brenda holds a BFA from the Art Institute of Boston and a Master's in Sign Language Education from Gallaudet University. Brenda and the interpreter Mareike Larsen are with us today to discuss interpreter training, art, film, and all things American Sign Language. Welcome to Speaking of Language, Brenda.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
So, Brenda, you are a native user of American Sign Language. What can you tell us about your experience growing up with this language in a predominantly spoken language world?
So my family is all deaf. My parents are deaf. My sister is deaf. Of course, back then, more than 40 years ago, people weren't really as aware of American Sign Language. So there was a lot more ignorance.
Yeah.
So when we signed in public, people did stare at us. Not in a friendly way. But again, we had advantages as well. For example, like noisy places, we could still communicate. Other people are trying to, shout in each other's ears and so forth. We could sign underwater to each other, communicate through windows. So we had our advantages that other people didn't. But eventually, more and more people became aware of American Sign Language. And now when we sign in public, people are very touched by it. And they're like, oh, my daughter's learning ASL. I taught my daughter when she was little. She knows a few signs here. Let her practice with you. And they're very friendly. And they'll say, their name. And things have changed so much in the 40 years. It's really amazing to see that. So many students are now so excited to learn ASL. And it's a very exciting time for the deaf community. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear that things have improved and that people are a little bit more aware and maybe accepting.
Right. People are much more open-minded, and people look at sign language as another legitimate language, not just a group of disabled people, Our language and our culture are really becoming recognized. Yeah.
Good.
For a long time, it felt as though, we were from Mars and people would look at us like we were Martians, different. And we're like, no, we're human just you. We just use a different language.
Of course, yeah.
So, as the new ASL expert at Cornell, what are your goals and what are you hoping to bring to the table through your classes?
Well, most importantly is fluency in the language and to appreciate ASL for the unique features that it has. Some things are different from other spoken languages. It's a visual mode of communication. So, there's advantages to that. It's a new way to see language. Spoken language is very different from a visual language. So for the students, I think it's very exciting. It's very fun. I want to make learning ASL fun. I think that all teachers' goal is to make the learning of their topic fun. Yeah. I would like to encourage them to continue to take language courses so that they become fluent enough to have conversational skills in ASL. And maybe someday when they're out in the workplace and they bump into a deaf person, they have the advantage of having another language under their belt. It's very useful. I think ASL is incredibly useful. It's not just, for conversing with deaf people. You can talk in a loud place with your friend. You can talk underwater, like I said, through a window. Yeah. There's all kinds of benefits.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between American Sign Language and other sign languages in the world? How are they similar? How are they different?
Well, most languages are really different from each other.
Oh,
Sign language is the same. Some countries, there's some influence from other countries, like Australian Sign Language, for an example. There's a lot of British signs, a lot of UK influence. So New Zealand Sign Language is influenced by New Zealand is influenced by Australian Sign Language. So you've got UK to Australia and then Australia to New Zealand.
Oh,
But ASL and British Sign Language, as another example, are incredibly different. Because our origins are from France,
Sure.
because of the history of deaf education here in the United States. American and British Sign Language are really different. Like, just a very obvious example is we use one hand for finger spelling, and BSL, British Sign Language, uses two.
Oh, wow.
For example, like A, B, C, D, E. In ASL, A, B, C, D, E, F. There you go. But in British Sign Language, BSL, A, B, C, D.
Oh,
So you see here, you use two,
Yeah.
and then E, and then this is F.
Yeah.
So it's really different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got friends who live in the UK, and they've taught me a few British signs. Let's see, darn, like darn it, or whatever. You would do this in ASL, like, oh, shoot, oh, dang it. But this is what you do in BSL, or British Sign Language.
Okay.
So other sign like meat. They say meat. In BSL, this is meat. So they're really radically different. School is another one. In ASL, this is our sign for school. In BSL, this is school.
Oh, wow. Yeah, very
so you
different.
see,
Yeah.
there's totally different signs. But again, some countries like Canada, they use both ASL and QSL there. So it depends on where you are regionally. There's over 140 different sign languages in the world. Over 140.
Wow.
Oh, 140 different documented sign language. Yep.
That's fascinating. I had no idea that there were that many different versions of sign language.
Yeah, language it's such a creative process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can represent one meaning in so many different ways. It's really actually an amazing human capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So, in the past, you've coordinated the Maine Deaf Film Festival as well as the Deaf Rochester Film Festival. Can you tell us a little bit about the process for curating and putting together an event like that?
Yeah, so we put out a call for entries. And back then, people had to physically send in VHS tapes. It's so much easier online now with everything digital. We get tons of submissions. We screen them all. We choose the ones we like. And the festival is about 4 days. 1 day for the junior festival. The young students, middle school students send in their original films. And then we would try to emphasize the deaf perspective instead of a lot of hearing producers. The positive things instead of that sort of pity model that used to exist, like poor deaf people, their struggles and strife. More and more now, I mean, technology has made it so easy for deaf filmmakers. You can do a film on your iPhone. I mean, it's just amazing. So we're seeing more and more entries from deaf artists, and that's exciting. So in the film festival, we see the authentic deaf perspective and deaf experience. You know, deaf people experience heartbreak and joy and the whole gamut of the human experience. And one interesting thing about that is that deaf humor, again, you know, humor is such an integral part of the culture. And deaf people really enjoy seeing deaf humor. It's challenging for people who are not members of the deaf community. They don't get the humor, but that's true in any culture.
Sure.
But the festival is a really good way to learn about deaf culture. Yeah, the deaf way of life is really showcased. Not just about learning language, but about learning the culture itself and what behaviors are appropriate, what humor looks like in the deaf community, how we interact with each other, and, you know, how we are a minority culture and within a majority culture, and how sometimes there's cross-cultural miscommunications and breakdowns that are humorous. They can be very humorous. So it's really about culture and not just about language. And our audience, if they're not aware of deaf culture and the deaf community, they really learn a lot about deaf culture just by watching the films.
That's great.
Some film submissions, more like, pitying deaf people. They can't hear all their frustrations and struggles. We don't accept those films.
Of course, yeah.
That's not. And because we actually feel that the deaf experience is so various, just like any human experience.
Sure.
And we want to show the positive sides of deafness. So.
Well, yeah, and celebrate your community.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Celebrate the deaf experience. That's the perfect way to say it.
Great. So, in addition to your interest in film, you also have a passion for art and museums. Earlier in our season this semester, we had Leah Sweet from the Johnson Museum on our podcast. And she talked about how we can integrate museums into language teaching and learning. So what are some things that a museum can offer to students or practitioners of American Sign Language that's maybe unique to a visual form of communication?
That's a great question. The potential for new museum exhibits and new ideas and how visual forms of communication can interface with that are limitless. I mean, art is visual. ASL is a visual form of language. So how those two things could pair up. I've been involved with a group called DIVA. It doesn't make sense in English. It's DVA. There's no E in it, so the interpreter is searching for an E. So, deaf, view, image, artist.
Okay.
DIVA. Deaf, view, image, artist, yeah. So that group, we've, started, in many, many years ago, 89, we said deaf artists need to express themselves and express the deaf experience. We're a minority culture living in a majority culture. So the experience is unique. I mean, we're an oppressed minority.
Yeah.
And there are many people who don't even realize that, oh my goodness, ASL has been oppressed in the education system specifically for many, many years, but in other places as well. So the deaf person's experience, how can they express that artistically? I mean, many artists work alone in isolation in other parts of the country, and we recognize that so many of these deaf artists bringing their work together, there's a theme here. It's amazing. I mean, it's like their work, and there's themes that are cropping up, shared themes from that deaf experience, and it really emphasizes the eyes and the hands. You know, those are proportionately bigger in deaf art, or there's other features that are made smaller in deaf art. I mean, it's intentionally not proportional.
Sure.
For example, like the mouth, there'll be no lips or no ears, for example.
Yeah, makes sense.
You know, that reflects our experience.
Sure.
So artists have begun to have a conversation about this. How do we represent the deaf experience in art?
Yeah.
For example, like one Russian deaf artist has a lot of fish in his artwork. And I was like, what is all this fish about?
Oh.
And then they explained it to me that because fish are deaf. They don't have ears. They're underwater. They don't rely on hearing. I don't know if it's true scientifically, but what we were told is that the reason why this deaf Russian artist believed that is that's his unique form of deaf art, is using the fish as a symbol of that. So other countries have their unique ways of expressing that deaf experience as well. So, there's an art gallery in Rochester, a deaf art gallery that's going to do deaf artists and their exhibit showing the deaf experience. And that's coming soon, next month. Cool. So anyway, the museum here at the Johnson Museum of Art, that question that you asked me, art often is static. So deaf artists, if they're painting, it's static too. But why not take advantage of movement? ASL is a moving language. So how can you incorporate that into artistic mediums? You have to be creative with that and break that concept of, an artist can do visual things that involve movement.
Yeah.
So deaf artists can maybe start thinking about that and how to incorporate movement into their artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what artists come up with next. I enjoy setting up exhibits for deaf artists, showing the deaf experience and showcasing that. And I've done that right along. And hoping maybe we can have something here in Ithaca as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Plan an exhibit.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
And then, other concepts that we've been throwing around is like deaf space. That's another concept of deaf space. That's a topic to explore. And like, what is deaf space? Like an open place with no visual barriers, because we need, a room with no columns and that the lighting is good. It's not too glaring. So, and maybe windows that you don't have, you have to have windows that are higher up. Deaf people like natural light, but we don't like being backlit. And if light is too harsh, so if you have like casement windows up on top, that's better. That's a deaf space. Or hallways that aren't too narrow, because deaf people like to chat as they're walking. And maybe a little bit more space in between you. So that's the concept of deaf space. And more places are thinking of these. The concept of universal design is not just deaf people need it. That's true, but it applies to many, many different people. It's very beneficial for a variety of reasons.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
For example, like steps or curbs. They have like, sidewalk curb cuts.
Yeah.
People are, can do a stroller, people use a wheelchair. But it benefits so many other people, not just people using wheelchairs or strollers, older people who have difficulty navigating, parents with children who are carrying them in strollers. Lots of people benefit from the curb cuts. And it's the same idea, universal design. Some people might prefer that, but the rest of the world can actually learn from that and see how the benefits apply to many different groups. So that kind of concept you could think about for art as well.
That's great.
Fantastic. So, if any of our listeners or viewers are interested in learning ASL or learning more about it, are there any resources you can recommend?
ASL is everywhere. So they could take an ASL class here at Cornell University now, or in the community. Someone just let me know that the Finger Lakes Independence Center offers ASL classes for adults right in the community. It's a community education course, and they told me that here in Ithaca, Barnes & Noble, the bookstore, has an ASL chat on Tuesdays from 5 to 7. And here at Cornell, we have ASL chatting hour. So 4:45 to 5:45 every Tuesday. Practice your sign language with us. There's online resources that are amazing, a plethora of them. lifeprint.com. They have ASL101.com. There's so many amazing YouTube videos, beginning ASL classes. So many people are teaching right online, so virtual classes as well. ASL is everywhere. It really is. So there's no excuse for not learning ASL if you want to, because it is everywhere now.
Terrific.
That's great. Brenda, before we sign off, we would like to ask you to share your favorite feature of ASL with us. What is that?
In ASL, you can modify the sign. They call it modify, like for adjectives and verbs or adverbs. For example, like driving a car, you can drive like this on a nice day, relaxed, kind of an average driving experience. There it is on your face and on your mouth and in your hands. And then if it's raining really bad and it's dark and you can't see anything, you're driving like this. Or if you're lazy and you're tired, you're driving like this. It's all the same sign, but your face modifies to reflect the mood that you're in or the range of experience you're having while driving. Another example, like for the sign blue. This is sign blue. It's an average blue. Dark blue, dark blue,
Okay.
bright blue, like that. So you see the difference on the face.
Yeah,
Blue. See, and you can see it in the eyes. Your eyes move to the side. And if it's average, your mouth is this is more of an average mouth,
Yeah.
It's amazing the range.
Yeah.
That's the same sign, but you use your face to emphasize or to modify. And that's my favorite feature of ASL. Yeah. I love playing with that.
Yeah. That's great. Very expressive language. Yeah.
Yeah, the face is part of ASL grammar. Yeah, I mean, that's an example, but it's actually an important part of the language that people forget, you know, that, it's just hands movement, but no, the face and the body are such an incorporated part of it to give the full picture. It's a rich language.
Great. Well, Brenda, thank you so much for speaking of language with us today.
Thanks for inviting me to come. Thank you so much.
This is a real treat.
Thank you, too.